Will Kyle Shanahan finally grow this year? We'll discuss that and Brandon Aiyuk's maturity or lack thereof next on the coaches meeting. What's up? Welcome to the coaches meeting. That's the coach. I'm Grant Cohn. The theme of today's show is growth and maturity. And we're going to end talking about Kyle's maturity, but we're going to start with the player who keeps putting himself in the news, Brandon Aiyuk. He has officially requested a trade, and it has been reported that the 49ers haven't even engaged with him in negotiations since May. This feels a little personal, and it seems like the Niners are reacting to all the different things that Brandon Aiyuk has made public. And it seems like they're kind of trying to paint him as an immature player who deserves the treatment they're giving him. Do you think Brandon Aiyuk is immature?
No, I don't think that he's immature. I feel like he's misguided. A lot of the emotion that he's putting out is misplaced. And the reason why you don't put out certain emotions in certain arenas is because, I'm going to use another but they can be misinterpreted. The problem that I see is that whoever Brandon is talking to is really steering how he's speaking in public. It's very much one note. And that's what's concerning to me. Is that I understand that the Niners haven't spoken to Brandon since May. And I and that's a report, but let's just go with that. Let's say if that were to be true. What you do understand is that it puts context around all of the talking in social media in or around that day that Brandon Aiyuk went to go meet with the Niners. Without that context, it looks like Brandon Aiyuk is in certain ways breaking ranks and going past his agent to go speak to the Niners. But in fact, he's going to an organization that hasn't been speaking to him in months. And he's doing his level best to be able to get a reaction, to be able to get some type of movement from the Niners or what they're doing. But it seems like every reaction that you're getting out of him is just basically him posturing that he's ready to either, i.e., leave the Niners, get traded, or play for somebody else. And you have to kind of put that in the misguided standpoint of emotions, because none of that stuff can happen unless the Niners play ball. That's the only thing that gets frustrating about situations like this, Grant, is that I feel BA from a standpoint of, man, you want your money good. All of this stuff is not helping you, though, right? And the Niners, they have ultimate leverage for tangible moves that can actually take place. So why talk? I feel like at this stage of the game, in any stage, but what has happened is that Brandon Aiyuk is almost in a way of like, it's like a game of Snake. You know, you used to play Snake on the game on like those old Nokia phones. And pretty soon the gig on Snake is that the snake gets too long because you keep hitting the dot and you're eventually going to run into your own snake. And the problem is I feel like Brandon is running into his own commentary now, and he's turning back on himself because now he's almost forced himself not to show up to camp. Because of how he's talked. He's almost forced himself to posture in a certain way because now you look like a dishonest broker if you don't follow these things through. He's not realizing that there's different aspects of this negotiation process that go from the boardroom to the agents, and then eventually there's going to be a whole nother element of this that bleeds into the locker room, whether you can help it or not. The season is coming, So
okay, so let's step back a little bit and look at Brandon's entire football career. From what we learned when he went on the pivot, he didn't play football his junior year of high school, he said, because he was doing all the wrong things. Right. So his parents, I know his mom, they're good parents. They were there with him. They're professors. They said, no football for you, Brandon. So immaturity was an issue for him in high school, which is why one of the best athletes in the country had to go to Sierra College for 2 years and then Arizona State. So at one point it was an issue for him. Then in his second year, he was in the doghouse, and we were never told exactly why. Maybe it's private, none of our business. But again, the implication was maturity, professionalism, because he was excellent on the field. Then for the last 2 years, he was freaking exemplary on and off the field, just as good as you could be until it was time to get paid. And it's common for a player to, stay quiet, keep their head down, do what you got to do, practice hard, block hard to get the bag. But then when it looked like the bag was in jeopardy or he might not get exactly what he thought, he started making things public. And I think this is maybe how the 49ers feel. But that doesn't necessarily mean the way I look at it is that most 26-year-old professional football players are immature compared to the average person. I mean, they've been having their butts kicked since they're 12. They're millionaires. Their growth will come a little bit like later in life when they become a little bit more down to earth. So yeah, he's immature, but like, is he Antonio Brown or Terrell Owens? No, I don't think so.
No, I agree with you, Grant, from the standpoint of is that, just because there is emotion doesn't mean that it's all there is that's there with Brandon Aiyuk. I think that also it plays that he hasn't said much. This is surprising because it's not so much as the fact that he's talking as much as he is, but it's commentary that we don't necessarily want to hear as fans, because a lot of it has been him letting the organization know that, you need to pay me what my worth is, or I don't want to be here if you don't get my deal done. But for the most part, Brandon Aiyuk has been fairly quiet. He has been a guy that's came in, put his head down. I mean, it's almost kind of been the legend of Brandon Aiyuk for a couple of years before the contract negotiations, because you would always just hear about how good he was doing. It was just something that you would love to be. He always was one of those players that got caught doing the right things at all times. I mean, with the doghouse years notwithstanding. But I will say that you do have to take a lot of this stuff with a grain of salt, because it's almost like it's like being friends with a married couple. It's like, no matter what she tells you behind closed doors, no matter what he tells you behind closed doors, don't get in the middle of it. Don't choose sides, because at the end of the day, they're going to choose each other. So you got to be careful.
Let me just say, I really admire Brandon in the fact that he stands up to Kyle and he stands up to the organization in a way that like Jimmy Ward did. But Brandon has much more leverage because he's worth $30 million a year on the open market. So I respect that he's not just like a Kool-Aid drinker and a go with the flow kind of a guy. Like, I see the organization the same way. Jimmy Ward saw the organization the same way. It's just that he hasn't really done himself any favors with the way he's gone about it. And I think he's allowed the Niners to sort of paint him as immature. So when they come in way under market value, people can say, he should be happy with that. Like, it's easy to take the Niners side because Brandon Aiyuk, like next year, I don't think Brock Purdy's going to do any of the things that Brandon Aiyuk did. And it's questionable that if any of these things that Brandon Aiyuk did actually helped him. I mean, we haven't even mentioned the fact that he's filming a documentary about this.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Look,
and wild.
I'll say this. I do feel like Brandon Aiyuk has a leg to stand on. But so do the Niners. You got to give them a little credit here too. I mean, they cultivated the kid. You yourself said it. Football is more of a curated sport than it ever has been, meaning that there's not a lot of guys you pick up off the side of the street and they automatically are just NFL guys. That's why Brock Purdy is so special, because in some instances, he wasn't a guy that had anybody tabbing his career. Brandon Aiyuk had some ups and downs in his career, but he had some really important people put their arms around him along the way. And it would be a little disingenuous not to notice that the syntax between the Niners, John Lynch, and Herm Edwards, Brandon Aiyuk having his agent, which is John Lynch's mentee. So I understand that Brandon wants his money, but let's not act like there's not infrastructure built around why he got here in the first place. Right. They did come out of a Super Bowl. The Niners aren't Swiss cheese. He's not talking to an organization that just completely doesn't know how to get it done. I understand that Brandon wants his money, but some of the level of the money that he wants, like the actual money that he's asking for, it has major implications on how this team is built intrinsically. So, we got to be honest brokers about that, too. For Brandon to get paid $30 million, that's essentially saying that you want Deebo Samuel cut.
True.
So,
Drippy Dad says GC and Coach, two of the best in the game. Thank you. No, thank you, Drippy Dad.
Thank you, Drippy.
Okay. So let's look at it from Aiyuk's perspective. From the Niners' perspective, they're taking a hard line with the player they've feared to be immature for a while. From Aiyuk's perspective, they insulted him with an offer that's way below market value. $26 million a year. I mean, number one wide receivers get $30 million a year. If you want to argue that he's not a number one wide receiver, that he's a high level number two, well, Jalen Waddle just got $28 million a year from Miami. So what did Brandon do to get disrespected like that? I know the average American wouldn't think $26 million a year is disrespect, but in his field, which he doesn't get to be in for very long, why does he have to take this slap in the face where Mike McDaniel is over in Miami taking care of Jalen Waddle? Do you think $26 million a year is an insult to Aiyuk?
No, I don't think $26 million a year is an insult. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat. If you want to get ranked amongst the best in your field, then you got to be specific about how you want to get there. And that's not here to say that they haven't done it on Brandon's side. But in my opinion, I think there were a lot of different ways to virtue signal towards Brandon Aiyuk being one of the best true receivers in the league, as he called himself, a true X. One thing that you have to realize is that when the rubber meets the road, the production has to meet the money. He's the fourth targeted player on a Super Bowl caliber team. That has to count for something, where half of those numbers got to be the numbers that you produce because you are a great player. But the other half of those numbers, you have to also admit you play with other great players as well, Brandon. That matters. And that counts in the grand scheme of that 1,300 to 1,400 yards that you finally got over after only hitting the 1,000 yards 2 times in your career. It's something that can be looked at as respectable if you were a true X on a team that doesn't have the requisite pieces and talent that we do, but you don't. All right. So that 1,400 a year, you got to look at it with skewed eyes just a little bit because of the fact that he does play in such a curated scheme. So I don't think that the 26 necessarily is something that he was short, that he got shorted with. But I think that there was also other ways to get to it. If he was going to get the 26 million a year, let's start talking about the guaranteed money. We could work on that. That's something that I really thought that's how this deal will get done. They're going to push this deal towards 40 million, possibly mid 40s to $50 million a year. Get Brandon Aiyuk at 26 to $27 million a year, which is only $1 million off the 26 that he feels is so disrespectful. I don't think $1 million would get rid of the disrespect in this scenario, and be able to put Brandon Aiyuk at top 3 guaranteed money a year, but keep his annual average down. And then you kick the can on Debo and see what you could do later. There's many ways to do it while saying, hey, we think you're worth 26. But if you just want 30 a certain way, come on. You got to be able to show me a little bit of diversity. Come on. You got to be more malleable than that. So I don't think 26 was bad, especially if 26 was a starting offer.
I think 26 as a start, if 26 is their final offer, I do think it's insulting. Not like hugely insulting, but I do think a little bit. But if that's their starting point and they end up at 28, see, to me, 28 is fair. They should probably compromise right there, because if Jalen Waddle is worth $28 million a year, then I think Brandon Aiyuk is too. You could argue, is Jalen Waddle better than Brandon Aiyuk? I don't think so. No, they're probably in the same tier. So that seems fair. And so what the Niners are essentially saying is, are they saying like, no, you're worth 26, or we don't want to pay you what you're worth? Because either way, it feels like a little bit of a slap in the face. Like, you're not in this tier. I'd rather have Jalen Waddle. Like, I don't really think that's fair. So it's one thing to be honest and be like, look, Brandon, you are worth $28 million a year. We just don't have to pay you that, and we're not going to. So if that's their stance, like, why are they treating him that way and not anyone else? They take care of all their players, right? Christian had a problem. They took care of him. But Brandon is like, sorry, man, like, we're going to just pay you less than we have to because we can. And tough. I would feel insulted. Like, I'm not in the Cabo clique to begin with, and now I have to, like, you're like taxing me. Why? It's not fair. But maybe no one cares. I feel like I can sort of empathize with him on that one.
Well, let's look at it this way. Jalen Waddle.
I would feel insulted in his position for sure.
Definitely. And I understand where you're coming from, Iggy.
Yeah.
Jalen Waddle's contract is 3 years, 84.7, 28.2 a year with the 18.8 signing bonus, 35.9 guaranteed at signing. All right, cool. But the way that bears out is sometimes we kind of look at this stuff and we say $28 million a year. Like, man, yeah, that's what the numbers say of the average, though. But the real base salary is his first year, he's only making $1 million this year. The next year after that, he's making 16.5. 2026, he's making 16.6. And 2027, finally, when he gets out of the end of that deal, he's making 23.9. He never hits $28 million a year. It's the average over. He never hits that. So that's where I'm saying his cap hit is 27.7 in 2027, and his cap hit is 31.1 in 2028. But he doesn't even get the closest he gets to $28 million a year over that money is 2028.
Well, I mean, we're talking about that's including the signing bonus. Like his cap number in 2027 will be 33, and in 2028 it'll be 37, which the signing bonus is part of that.
True.
Yeah. But also with Waddle, like there's zero guaranteed money in his deal after 2025. None. So it's this big $28 million a year. It's essentially like a 1-year extension with team options.
Come on. That's what I'm saying. It's like,
and that's what I'm saying. Like you can't even offer him that.
But I think this is a bad deal. I think this is hollow, right?
It's a bad deal for Waddle, right?
Yeah.
So what about what they're offering Aiyuk?
I think that Aiyuk's deal is adequate with where he's at, though. They don't have as many guys over at Miami as we do. And Waddle is actually used as the number 2 guy. All right, let's go ahead and put it out there. Who are the number 2 options on this offense?
Okay, so you're saying the fact that they also have Kittle and McCaffrey, and Miami really is very much Tyreek and Waddle dominated. Okay, that's a good point.
It's McCaffrey and Debo.
That's a good point.
Offense. Right. And then on top of it, you almost.
But still, what I could say is like, but I'm still like the highest targeted player on the team. Like, even with all those guys.
Well, he's the highest because he's the only true receiver on the team. But
you would say agree. I agree.
You're the highest targeted receiver on the team that you're the only receiver on. And on top of it, if you really want to take that scope out even bigger, we throw the ball least. We throw the ball the least out of any team in the NFL. So it's kind of like, what do you want to do? You want to be king of the molehill? What are we really talking about?
I just think it's interesting how the Niners are basically saying, like, look, man, you're going to take a little bit less than you're worth on the market and you're going to like it. And all of the fans are going to take our side. But if they did that with Brock next year, he wouldn't necessarily have to make a TikTok video about it. I feel like Brock would have a lot of support. Like, hey, wait a second, man. Brock's an elite quarterback. Trevor Lawrence got $55 million a year. Someone's going to get $60 million a year before he's eligible. And if they offer him 45 or something like that, I think a lot of people will be like, hey, wait a second, that's an insult. Even though he's getting offered $45 million or $50 million a year. Hey, that's an insult in his industry. And it would be.
I agree.
So you know what I'm saying?
Like,
like, that's where I'm coming from.
That much I can get on board with is that the Niners, they're running out of players that they can do this to and get good graces from He
Brandon's an easy target. He's an easy target. Brock's not.
I'm frustrated because he doesn't make it. He doesn't help himself.
I'm frustrated for him too. It's like, man, you should have contacted the two of us. We could have helped you on this one, man. Because
big time, Brandon.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're allowing the Niners to make you look like you know what I'm saying, like the selfish diva. Like that's not necessarily who you are, but they're kind of swaying fans to make you think that way. Yeah,
Brock is gonna be the child that reveals the original sin. He's going to be able to be we're going to talk about this, but there's situations with him and Kyle that's going to be different. And I think that the Niners, this is pretty much their last contract with one of their high marquee players where they get the posture and move as if they're not the problem, because I don't think this is going to fly with Brock. They can't do this with Brock.
Because theoretically, again, they could do the same exact thing, right? Hey, Brock, here's a very generous offer of $45 million a year. What are you talking about? The last guy just got $60 million a year. Yeah, well, we don't technically have to pay you that because we could force you to play out the final year of your rookie deal, then tag you twice. And in that case, you'd be getting like $35 million a year. So we have all the leverage. Screw you. What are you going to do about it? Like, that's kind of been their attitude with Aiyuk. They will never do that with Brock.
But I think Brock is the only player that can come in and at the negotiation table can say, fuck the numbers. I am the numbers. You tell me another quarterback that's done what I've done since I've been here, and I'll sit back, I'll chill. But for all of the trappings and tricks, and for all of the things that you've done with this genius that you guys have at head coach, I'm the only one that's given him the most success that he's seen. Nobody, not even Nick Bosa, could go into negotiations and talk like that.
Nobody.
Who can do you like me?
Nobody.
And who can tell you I need money?
All right. On that note, let's do some sleeper picks, WNBA style, because it's been too long. Too long.
Been a long time.
Actually, it's not WNBA day. I guess they're off, which is too bad. We got to do baseball. Pretty soon it'll be football time to make them picks. But now it's baseball. Baseball's back. Aaron Judge, he's good at baseball. 32, 6'7", 282 pounds. That's like if Eric Armstead played baseball.
Yeah. 6'7", 282.
Yikes.
He's a big man.
He's a big dude. So what are we talking? How about home runs? Will he hit one today? He hasn't hit one in 2 games. He's due. What do you think?
A swinger. He's
a swinger.
I think they call them sluggers.
I think he's due to hit a home run, a dinger.
He's due to hit a dinger.
Okay, Bryce Harper. I've for sure heard of him. What are we going to talk about with Bryce? Is he hitting a dinger today? Oh, definitely. I don't know about Bryce.
No.
He hasn't. I mean, he's had one in the last 4 games. What are we thinking, dinger wise?
I think he's not gonna hit dingers. He's not gonna hit.
No
dingers.
dinger for Bryce.
Dingers. No dingers.
Let me see if I've won recently. Oh, can we just talk about me winning recently? Okay.
$144, bro. You're
fucking
loaded.
So Angel Reese didn't get the rebounds, but Taurasi got the points. Plume didn't get the points like we knew, and Kennedy Carter definitely got the points with 34. Then before that, all of them. I'm getting good at WNBA. Bonner, I don't even know them.
You won. Hold on. Does that say $5 for $24.55?
Yeah.
What kind of app is this?
That's right. It's the sleeper app.
This is wild.
Yeah.
Everybody get on this and use sleeper picks right away.
I'm telling you. I am telling you. Look, if you want to know all the right picks, come to me because I'm on a heater.
Man, you're awesome, Grant. This is crazy. Yeah.
Thanks, coach. Okay, one more.
All right.
One more. Who are we going to do? Okay. Soto. He's good.
He's
Soto. Good.
Wow.
I think Soto's getting a hit today. What do you think?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Pick up on Juan Soto, Dingertown. He's awesome.
Okay, that's my pick. Aaron Judge, Bryce Harper, and Juan Soto. Done.
Done, dude.
Done, dude. So if you want to play, download the app and then make a deposit using the promo code Cohn, COHN, and they'll match the deposit up to $100. And if you tell me on Twitter, I will give you $10 of my own out of my own pocket.
Out of his own pocket, guys.
Because I'm generous.
For picks.
Isn't that crazy?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. All right, here's the question of the day. Is this the year Kyle Shanahan's finally going to grow? I ask because he's now lost 2 Super Bowls as a head coach. He's the only head coach in NFL history to lose two Super Bowls in which he was winning by at least 10 points. So now is this the year that he finally gets over himself and realize it's not all about him. It's about like, for example, Andy Reid, famous story, right? Janitor comes up to him, says, I've drew up this play. What do you think, Andy? What does Andy say? I love it. We're going to install it. What would happen if a janitor or a player or anyone came up to Kyle with a play? What would Kyle say to him?
Why did you send me this in open air? Like, why would you send me this in public?
I mean, he's notorious for explaining to you why your play doesn't work. Well, did you think about it against cover 4? Did you think about it against cover 6? Well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens? And he tears you apart and you feel stupid afterwards. So that's the difference between
the type of person where he's like, I only take ideas on Thursdays. You know that. It's Monday. You're late.
Look, a lot of people like Kyle, but everyone agrees that Andy Reid's the best coach in the league. And I think everyone would also agree that Kyle has a much bigger ego than Andy Reid. And that's a problem. You can't have a bigger ego than the best coach in the league, especially when he's an offensive specialist like you. So do you think this is the year Kyle finally gets over himself and starts treating his players the way Andy Reid treats his players?
Man. No, I can't. Every time I think, you know what, coach, this is the time for you to, like, Grant's giving you an out. Maybe you could pivot right now. This is an awesome opportunity for you to kind of start anew, maybe build something different on YouTube. I always give up. I can't. No, I don't believe this. He is who he is, man. I've been floating this kind of scenario in my head and on a couple of shows, but walk with me, Grant, because we haven't talked about this in a pre-show. So give me the eyes if this is stupid or cut me off. I know how you like to do it. So if this, there you go. Give me those if you don't like it. But I look at this as recipe versus diet, right? And when you are older and, you know, me and Grant, we have shared recipes. This is perfect. Me and you have shared recipes tons of times, have we not?
We certainly have.
The difference between recipe versus diet is when you are going to the grocery store, you know, I'm going to go and I'm going to get some eggs. I maybe pick up a loaf of bread, some avocados and tomatoes, maybe some arugula salad, you know, a couple of pieces of fish, and some diet soda and some water and milk and some oatmeal. And that's shopping for your diet, because when I bring that parcel home and I lay it out in the kitchen, I can make multiple recipes, any type of food that I usually eat, because I'm shopping for my diet versus a recipe where, Grant, you know, when you're shopping for a recipe, what do you have to do? You have to be ridiculously particular. All right. You have to always mull over every last ingredient to make sure that you're getting exactly the right ingredient that you want, because you want the flavor to come out the exact same way. But it's also very expensive. It's not practical. You second guess yourself along the way. And what's even crazier is that you don't have a full kitchen if all you're doing is shopping for recipes. You just have vestiges of what you want to eat all the time, but you don't have any variety. You don't have anything that calls for the moment. I mean, if you shopped for chicken Parmesan and I come over to your house at 10 o'clock in the morning and I need you to make me breakfast, you're kind of SOL. It's going to be hard for you to make that. And I feel as though that's what Kyle cannot get out of. Kyle is still shopping for a recipe. I mean, and one would even say, if you want to take that analogy a little bit further, can Kyle cook? Can you cook if all you know how to make are certain things, right? But can you cook, or can you cook to the context of your diet, to what's happening at the moment, where it's like, you know what, I don't give a fuck if it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Let's open up the fridge and we're going to be able to cook. And I just feel as though that Kyle, he doesn't want to give up his recipes. He needs to learn how to cook. He needs to learn how to create something that's going to force him to have a diet and actually go get the things that are going to be able to be that he can have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Agile, and to be able to adapt in the biggest moments, because that's the truth of the matter is that we're going to beat over half the league. That's just where we are as a team. The truth is that the teams that we need to beat are the teams that can beat us, and they have a diet. They can do anything. So did you give me the look?
I think what's interesting, you're talking about diet. Like if let's stay with this, he's going to Safeway, he's got his grocery list, and there's something that he hasn't been putting on his list for a long time and is messing up his diet, man. And you could call it whatever, you know, fiber, vegetables, whatever. It's the offensive line.
Yes.
That's what's missing. And to me, when you want to talk about growth with Kyle, it starts and ends there. And here's the way I look at Kyle. You've amassed this incredible offense. It was statistically the best offense in the league in a lot of areas last year, but it's not good in the trenches. So you always have to be deceptive, even though you have all this talent, right? And that's what Christian McCaffrey's all about. If you load up to stop the run against the Niners, you can stop the run, but they can kind of flex out and do play action and trick you and pass. And if you really want to stop the pass against the Niners, they can for sure run the ball. But when it's time to impose their will, they can't. at anything because of their offensive line. And you know what? It's by design because that's where Kyle comes into play. Don't worry. It's okay. We have a genius who can work around this bad offensive line. That's his limitation, and it's his ego. If he can finally invest in the offensive line, he won't be as necessary. And that's scary to him. But look at Sean McVay. He has one hell of an offensive line. He just invested big time in that guard, Jonah Jackson. Like, McVay gets it. No one calls him the genius that Kyle is, but he has a Super Bowl ring, and he's got one hell of a team this year too. So that, to me, is the growth I want to see from Kyle. And he already waited until round 3 to get an offensive lineman and didn't get an offensive tackle, all because we told him to.
Yeah. The offensive line is going to be a huge issue moving forward because they have to honor it. When you get into games where you get great teams, in order to take a team out of the game is you got to run the ball. And a lot of times you have to take yourself out of that process when it's time for you to just beat a team into submission. That's, if you want to know who we are in our biggest moments, look at those third downs in the Super Bowl, man. Look at that. You know, we could not control the line of scrimmage. And that's something that's going to keep coming up game after game, year after year. Let's hope that what they brought in this year is going to be able to give us an uptick. But the reason why we're able to talk about all of the players on this team, especially offensively, is because they're our offensive line. Juwan Jennings is the offensive line, right? Debo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk and George Kittle is the offensive line. Like, these guys, they play around the offensive line to try to engineer around it, and it works against the Steelers. It's gonna work. It's gonna work.
It'll work against Arizona.
It's gonna work against. Thank you. It's gonna work against Arizona. But when you go and see Baltimore and they knock your head off, all of a sudden we lean back on all of the weak ass teams that we feasted on to be able to run away from the reality of we saw a real team today, and they went directly for where we're weak at.
We got trounced in the trenches.
They killed our
trounced.
Yeah. So
all this talent on offense, and we scored 19 points because we couldn't block anyone except for our left tackle. He did a good job. Good job, Trent.
And in certain ways, I'm gonna sound sacrilegious, man, but in certain ways, that group of 4 is so bad. Trent gets a lot of love because of how he plays, because that line doesn't play with him. Yeah. So I'm just being honest, man. I'm not here to say that Trent isn't what he is, but his skill set falls on a really good backdrop because he doesn't play with other guys that are even nearly as good as him. It's just the truth.
I got something else I want to say about growth for Kyle. This is another thing with him. He wants it all to be about him, right? His ego is much more into it than Andy Reid. But when it's time for Kyle to put his reputation on the line on a 4th down in the 4th quarter of a Super Bowl or an NFC Championship game, what's he doing? Punting. Kicking a field goal. Like, he did it against the Rams a couple of years ago. He did it in the Super Bowl. He had 4th down and 4 in Chiefs territory, once right outside the red zone, once inside the low red zone, and both times he kicked field goals. Like, man, no. You're Kyle Shanahan. You have the number 1 offense. You should be the reason you win this game. Don't ask Jake Moody and Steve Wilks to close it and then fire Steve Wilks when he doesn't. You close it. And he's like, it almost seems like he's afraid to try sometimes, which, hey, man, if you want to be Andy Reid isn't like, say, hey, let's kick this field goal right here. And then Steve, I want you to take this one home for me. Like, no, he has a play for the moment and he's not afraid of it, even if he struggled all game. So that's another one for Kyle.
Well, let me ask you this. Out of all the years that you've seen Kyle as a head coach here, which is all of them, right? How many instances can you remember or go back to where you felt as though that Kyle left everything on the field, where you could tell, like, he doesn't care if he gets fired right here. He just wants to win?
I always feel like he's worried about getting fired. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what we see, that we interpret as not lack of growth or indecisiveness, is where we say, like, what are you doing? Just keep running. Why are you? Kyle is, I feel like there are moments in games where Kyle will try, Kyle will do enough to put out his game plan. But there is a moment in the game where he cuts bait mentally and emotionally. And he starts worrying about, all right, how do I close this out where I can start building in culpable deniability because we're going to lose this one, right? Like, how many games has Kyle lost literally at the last play and you kind of catch him flat-footed where it's like, yo, I don't know what to do with this one. We tried our level best. You saw me switching things up. You saw me try this at mechanism. You saw me basically leave nothing out there, leave nothing, no stone unturned. And, I don't even know what to tell you after losing. But it seems as though that every time there's a failure, Kyle seems very much like reserved and almost kind of like bracing for the punch, like he knows it's coming. And he coaches that way, where they almost seem like they don't want to be embarrassed by looking like they cared. Like they don't like once it gets to the point where they have to kind of like throw the kitchen sink, they'll stop at the kitchen sink. It's like, no, we're above that process. We're not going to look desperate to win. We're going to be the Niners the whole way, even if we lose.
I love that you compared, to bring it back to the beginning before we move on, I love that you compared Kyle Shanahan to a chef who can only make certain recipes. Like, for example, my mom could cook. I can cook certain of her recipes. Like, I'm not as good as her. I'm learning. So, like, it's kind of like him. Like, could his dad cook? Maybe. Can Kyle cook? He can cook his dad's recipes. But, like, if he had to go on vacation somewhere and they didn't have certain of the ingredients, could he make do? Could he figure it out? Or, because we see sometimes, like, when he doesn't have Debo in his pantry, he's like, oh, shit. What do I do today? I don't have that secret ingredient that I love that I put in every freaking dish. Grant. I don't have it. And now, like, my stuff is mid at best. We see that with him a lot. Like, a real offensive genius should be able to whip up anything.
Because you see it from a molecular level. Like, it's kind of like, all right, I don't have this ingredient or I don't have this player, but that doesn't mean that we're completely blown out of the water from the concept. We can still find and if you look at it, Kyle shops for his team like he's looking for a recipe instead of shopping for a diet, right? A good diet is saying, when I go into the grocery store, I'm going to the produce section no matter what. I may not know what's in there that day, but I'm going there because I know we need leafy greens.
I know offensive line is the foundation of a good team.
Go! That's my point. You see what I'm saying?
And it may not necessarily fit my scheme, which is the particular recipe I'm cooking that day, but I need this in the house.
I need this in the pantry, no matter what. And
because if I don't have it, I'm extremely limited.
Thank you, bro. And that's why Kyle doesn't care about O-line. He's like the guy that's walking up to the counter with all of this stuff for a recipe, and then you look at what he eats in real life outside of the recipe, and it's nothing but Funyuns and Coke and Mountain Dew. And it's like, dude, this is what you eat for a living? It's like, you can't live off this. But it's like, I have this recipe for chicken parmesan. And it's like, yeah, but you're going to eat that one meal all the time. You don't have any water. This is all soda. Like, you need sustenance. And that's how I feel like certain teams that are built a certain way, like the Ravens or like the Chiefs, where their diet is, hey, man, get the trenches before we do anything else. Get the offensive line straight. So
can I just say something that's kind of blasphemous, but super true? Think about this, Niner fans. If all of a sudden the Niners had a good offensive line, they wouldn't need Kyle anymore.
They wouldn't.
They'd have everything. You wouldn't need a genius coach. Just an average coach with that team wins. So that's something to think about, man. If he finally gets the offensive line, he's not as important because he's Mr. Trick You, Mr. Keep you on your toes. Like, okay, but if you just had a good right tackle, if Colton McKivitz and Jake Brendel weren't starting for your team and you had, Penei Sewell and other guys you've passed on, you could pay $3 million a year for a coach. You could have freaking Jim Tom Sula. No, I'm not going to go that far, but you could have any average good coach and win. So that's where I'm looking at with Kyle. Let's take some super chats. I just came in and heard Kyle Levy is a genius. No, that's one more thing I wanted to say. The real genius, if there's a genius in the league and it's not Andy Reid, I think it's McDaniel. And I think once he gets a quarterback who's better than Tua, we're going to see some really cool stuff. I feel like he has the original ideas. That whole cheat motion thing was him last year. Yes.
I would say that Kyle is in a class of his own. He's the only active coach who's considered as great who has not won a Super Bowl. There's nobody. There's no other coach that has not won a championship where he's hands down widely renowned as being a genius by all of his fans and followers. You can't name another football coach that's active right now that everybody calls a genius. It's hands down, beyond the shadow of a doubt, stamped, but they have not won a Super Bowl. I don't even think Sean McVay is a genius, and he's at least won a Super Bowl.
It's a phenomenon.
It is.
It's almost like him not winning a Super Bowl is added to his legacy. It's kind of hard.
Yeah, it makes him more of a genius. It adds like QAnon. It adds
if you really understand. Until he wins the Super Bowl, until then, no. David Baker says, I think my favorite part is your sleeper picks. Thank you very much. They're great. Kyle Levy stands on dumb, says Kyle Levy to the Hall of Fame, 3 Super Bowl losses with 10-point leads. David Baker says, if you don't grow, you rot. Tommy Huxley says, executive chef Tommy never follows a recipe. Kyle Levy says, arugula is almost as nasty and useless as Hold on.
Arugula's good, man. What? Nice, peppery, back fitted, like stop. Pause. I shouldn't have said that. But look, arugula is good, man, especially with some other mixed greens. You're tripping.
You could put it on a margarita pizza. You could have arugula salad with like some shaved Parmesan cheese. I really like arugula.
Arugula's fire.
With some prosciutto.
Or just
Dimitrov says Kyle has rather weak drop back game and can't adjust, even if he becomes the most humble person in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't like when he goes 5 wide, Dimitrov?
I can't stand it.
Asa 86 says nothing about KS temperament disposition, says wisdom growth as a person coach. Has his system evolved or grown over all these years? Just a recipe.
We talked about this. Like Kyle the man. You know, what are you doing personally? Like, what does Kyle do on his free time?
Here's a question. Who's more immature? Brandon Aiyuk or Kyle Shanahan?
Only you can
Sorry.
come up with these questions, dog. Like,
it just popped in my head and I had to say it.
They're laying right there only for you.
Because we're talking about two people's maturity.
Are like
we're definitely paralleling them. So who's more mature? Let's not have it as a negative. Who's more mature, the head coach or the wide receiver? The 44-year-old head coach or the 26-year-old wide receiver?
The fact that I can't answer this right away should be telling.
Yep,
so let's just say
problem.
That.
Michael McCann, it should be clearly the head coach. Michael McCann says $28 million in Florida may as well be $32 a year in Cali.
Thank you.
Good point. That's a good point. He got a Florida 28. Fish and Chip says KS loses his you-know-what muscles off script. Poop. Wow. Thank you very much, Fish and Chips. That was descriptive. Okay.
I really like that.
Okay, let's talk about Brock now.
Let's go.
So certain players have kind of stood up to Kyle a little bit. Jimmy Ward, Brandon Aiyuk hasn't gone so well. Oh, Jimmy Garoppolo stood up to Kyle Shanahan a little bit, said his plays freaking stunk. Didn't go so well for Jimmy Garoppolo. Then there's Brock, good old Brock, nice little Brock. He would never do something like that, except he's the guy who told, I think it was George Kittle, to shut up in like the first game they played together. That's really how he endeared himself to the team, by acting like a veteran who wasn't scared of anyone. He seems like he's behind the whole aw shucks middle America exterior, that he's hyper competitive and demanding. Do you think eventually Brock Purdy will stand up to Kyle and say, hey, I want to call some plays. Hey, I want to set protections. I want more autonomy because I'm the best quarterback you've had here. And it may not be this year, but when he's making $60 million a year one day, is he going to have it in him?
All right. Yeah. When he gets paid. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is the new regime of the Kyle Shanahan era that is being ushered in. It's Brock. Kyle, make no mistake about it. Kyle and John got those extensions because Brock came in here and saved their bacon. If I'm Brock, I hate to put it to you this way, but I know you love me. I know you like our relationship, but I will never let you forget how I pulled your season out from the doldrums off the bench. And when it comes time for
more
me to
than just season, your career, your tenure here.
Yeah, your tenure. Really, it was on life support, especially when Trey still in the building, right? Like, not only that, but even when you move Trey on, I made good on that move and put perfume on top of that stinking turd of a situation with another season to get you to the Super Bowl. So you guys owe me. You got to pay like you weigh. On top of it, the way this team is built is going to have to be in the auspices of how I am growing, right? So, I understand that you guys like Deebo Samuel and you guys want to pay Christian McCaffrey, but the facts are is that I need offensive line to protect me. Brock can only do so much standing upright. The most of it is him being able to protect himself and be able to run the team the right way. I think that they kind of created a monster in that they say that they like the bedside manner, if you will, of how he came in as a quarterback, but they're going to get what they asked for. This kid was not developed here. He was developed outside of this organization, which means that he's got different roots, which means that there's really nobody here that can really like lay claim to his ascension. I think that Brock, I don't want to go too far off the rails because I think that Brock gets it. I think that he'll move. I mean, I'm not being sacrilegious here with my comment, but more in like Drew Brees, Tom Brady, like he's going to be consulting with the coaching staff. I really do see a healthy relationship between Brock and Kyle. For the simple fact that I think that Brock is smart enough to understand, and hopefully Kyle, that they need each other, right? Brock is in the position that he's in is because he was able to take advantage of the opportunities in front of him. But let's not make no mistake about it. Brock shines in this particular offense. I don't know what he looks like outside of this, and I don't want to. So if they come together and understand how they need each other, I don't think that it'd necessarily be a, hey, you run what I want, I'm running plays now situation. But if Kyle lets it happen, I think that they could come into a really good blossoming relationship, especially two offensive guys, almost like a Sean Payton and Drew Brees.
Kyle says all the right things about Brock, like, hey, you're the real deal and he's really good and should be MVP and da-da-da-da, but he still kind of treats him like he's replaceable in the sense that they don't invest in the offensive line. So if he gets hurt, if he dies, he dies. Like, who cares? Oh, well, that's football. Mm-hmm. They don't make any special considerations there, and they don't give him any like extra autonomy or power at the line of scrimmage. You don't get to set protection. Sorry. Like, you're basically a novice. Yeah, that's how they treat him. What are you going to say?
Did Jimmy set protections?
No, absolutely not. But like the whole idea is Brock's so much better.
Okay, but Brock is so much better, but he's inside of the same system. I think when you start seeing Brock doing things that are not traditional to what we've seen out of most quarterbacks, those are going to be things that virtue signal towards his growth, right?
What I wanted to say, though, is that like it's fine to do that when he's making $900K a year. But once they give him the extension, if they continue to not invest in the offensive line, if they continue to treat him like a novice who can't have any power of his own at the line of scrimmage, then Brock can say something. And he can say it in a diplomatic way, but he could say something like, it'd be nice if I could just had a little time, or if I could be in charge of setting the protections myself, maybe I wouldn't be injured all the time, things like that. And if it comes down to Brock in his prime, if he's proven he's a top-level quarterback worth the contract, or Kyle, I mean, the Niners will sign with Brock. So I think eventually he could stand up to Kyle, and that would be the biggest threat that Kyle's ever had to his authority. A top-level quarterback with a mind of his own who doesn't necessarily agree with Kyle on everything and won't accept being scapegoated.
Okay, so I want to push back. Listen, man, we heard what Jed said. And it's a little different now because Jed is actually running the organization, right? It's his now. Are we quite sure that the Niners would side with Brock over Kyle? Really think about that.
Well, again, if he's a really legit quarterback and his issue is he doesn't have quite enough time or he doesn't have enough power compared to guys like Jordan Love or CJ Stroud, like, that's a legitimate gripe. And if Kyle won't give it to him, then maybe the answer is trade Kyle and bring in a coach who's more invested in Brock than himself.
Okay, and I hear you. I just don't think that that's viable. Kyle's a little more than the head coach here. In order to remove Kyle, the membrane is kind of getting set in, Grant. Like, He's here with the front office. I mean, at this point of the game, we don't even know what Kyle's level of access is to the organization, especially to Jed. And in certain ways, you heard how they told that story. They talk about that Brock story with Kyle as the genesis. Like the Bible of Brock starts with Kyle Shanahan is the first book in that Bible. And that's Kyle is the guy that told me, hey, he's our guy. You know, I think this guy's better than the other guys that we have. Like you see how Jed talks about how Brock came into our organization. He gives Kyle basically all of the credit. I get ready for a ride, man. I see the Niners being way more ingratiated to their bottom line than they are like what makes sense. And if this was on an organization where things make sense, where the coach is no bigger than a good quarterback, and we all know that, you know, organizations will take a quarterback over a coach in a heartbeat. Yeah, I get that. But that's not, would you say that this is just a little bit of a different scenario?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like Kyle has been the Niners love Kyle because he's made them relevant without a franchise quarterback. It's tough to be relevant in the NFL if you don't have a franchise quarterback, and Kyle makes you that. But if Brock's a franchise quarterback, then Kyle once again isn't as important to the team anymore. And if Brock is a franchise quarterback and he really has the demeanor of Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, then when he's 26 or 27 making all that money, he's going to want control of the offense, some of it. And if Kyle won't give him any, and continues to treat him the way he treated Jimmy when Jimmy was one of the higher paid players in the league, then there could be some tension between him. And I don't know, it seems pretty typical to side with the quarterback if he's that guy. Like, you're not siding against Peyton Manning or Drew Brees. I'm not saying Brock's that guy, but if you pay him and he becomes that guy, then Kyle needs to get out of the way eventually.
All right. I mean, yeah, I just, you know, the owner said that it didn't even matter if they lost the NFC Championship game. He still would have seen the season as a success. For me, that sounds like a guy who's so enthralled with what his coaches have told him that he's almost kind of like, I question if Jed can think for himself.
I also don't think that Jed can see 3 years down the line what's waiting for him once he gives his contract to, you know, who can see it though? I believe Kyle. I think Kyle knows exactly what we talked about it earlier. Kyle is concerned with winning, but he's also majorly concerned with survival. And part of the way he survives is never marrying himself to a quarterback. He never does, never has. Do you think Kyle in certain ways will undercut Brock this year to give him options other than marry himself to Brock long term?
Do I think Kyle will undercut Brock? No, I'm looking for Brock to almost kind of undercut Kyle. I think that Brock's consistency and his kind of like why Brock is a starting quarterback in the NFL is that Brock has shown an ability to retain a lot of information on the fly while he plays. His processing ability is next level. And it's only going to get better as he gets more times at bat. And my thing about that is that Brock was able to carry 1 feet over that I haven't seen many quarterbacks be able to do. And that's lose a big game in the Super Bowl and not be thrown under the bus by Kyle Shanahan. Like, in order for you to play well enough for people to kind of look over the quarterback and still lose and still kind of look at Kyle and say, well, what were you doing on offense? Because it wasn't Brock this time. I think that's Brock's special power, where he knows how to ingest exactly what Kyle is giving him. But at times, you know, you can only run the plays that you're given. Kyle has left Brock out there to dry a couple of times, if you want to talk about undercutting. And I think it's made him stronger. I think Kyle left Brock out to dry in the Cincinnati game. I think he left him out to dry against the Minnesota game. I think that Kyle didn't do much for him in a lot of different games down the stretch in the Baltimore game. He kept pushing the ball down the field when we got away from the run game. And the only reason why is because Kyle was running scared. He got up against a team that didn't give a damn about his 1-5 offensive line, and they was whooping that ass. And what did he do? He kept passing the ball because he couldn't run anymore. Don't you find that funny? That when we get into bad moments in games, we don't line up and run the ball and rely on our offensive line. What do? We pass. Mm-hmm. Kyle wants to just get the ball out there because he wants something where on film it can say, hey, there goes that open receiver. There goes that beautiful play that you missed. But that doesn't mean that it should be ran within the context of what's going on right now. And that definitely doesn't mean that the strongest players of your team during the strongest moments of your game need to be the farthest away from the football, ergo going 5 wide on third downs. But I digress. Brock has still been able to show consistency even through those low moments. I think as he gets stronger, it's going to be more and more evident that Kyle is the issue here. All right. And I think that Kyle can't undercut Brock because if that was the case, it would have happened by now. The kid came in. He's not everything you want him to be, which nobody is. But don't look now. But Brock still has been lights out since he's got here. He's come in here and done his job. And that's something that CJ Beathard couldn't do, Nick Mullins couldn't do, Trey Lance damn sure couldn't do, and Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't even survive Kyle because his body would fall apart. He couldn't stay healthy. So I think Brock's going to expose Kyle.
Here's how I think Kyle will undercut Brock. I think Kyle's looking at this Aiyuk situation and projecting it forward to Purdy and seeing like, damn, if I don't manage this, we're going to have no choice but to give this guy $60 million a year next year. And that's not what I want to do. So what I can do is continue to run the hell out of the ball, be at the bottom of the league in pass attempts per game. And in a key loss this season, I can sort of blame him for it, as I've been known to do. I haven't really blamed Brock yet, but I can blame Brock for a key loss. I can keep the pass attempts low. And then when it's finally time to present an offer for a contract extension, I can use the lack of pass attempts against him, just as I use the lack of targets for Aiyuk against him, and offer a very generous extension of 4 years, 180. That's $45 million a year. That's the exact same deal that Kirk Cousins got from the Falcons. And I can imply like, look, I think you're really good, but not as good as Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence and all these young hotshot quarterbacks who are getting these incredible deals. I think you're as good as Kirk Cousins. And if you don't like that, then we can't come to a deal. I think that's what's going to happen. $45 million a year tops for Brock.
I love the way how you like get to like the obvious thing that we would probably say on the phone. Like, because that is yes.
And again, like the leverage is like, oh, you don't want $45 million a year? Cool. Then go make $60 million somewhere else and we'll go get Kirk Cousins, who's making $45 million a year. Why should we pay more for you than Kirk Cousins? Are you better than Kirk in Kyle's eyes? I don't think so.
I hate the fact that you're right. Yeah.
I heard that Kyle and Kirk talk on the phone every day. I don't know if that's true, but I heard they do.
I heard that too.
Yeah. So, look, does he like Brock? Absolutely. Does he like him more than Kirk? I don't know. So that's how this is going to go down, Brock. They love you, but not that much. And that's what's going to be the offer. And it's going to be 15 million less than what you think you're worth. And it's going to get very interesting.
He's going to do it. Brock doesn't. Who does Brock have in the NFL that's really going to protect him from something like that? Usually, sometimes players have. Yeah, exactly. There's nobody.
And then you're not seen as a top level quarterback if you're making mid money. It's like, okay, well, you're still a product of the system, and your own team feels that way. It's going to be a big slap in the face because they've been boosting him up like, oh, you think he's a system quarterback? Well, the offer is going to say system quarterback.
You think they're going to Kurt Warner Brock? You know how like they Kurt Warner Brock? You know how they Kurt Warnered him? Like Kirk, at one point, Kirk was like legit one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But because of his pedigree and where he came from, people would always like play Kirk down. Like, it's Kirk. Like, great guy, though. Great guy.
Yeah.
But he's no Montana. He's no Marino. He's not. It's just a great guy, but he's not.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing with him. It's so patronizing. He's such a good quarterback. He's so underrated. But when it's time to actually get to the negotiating table, like, you don't actually think you're as good as Aaron Rodgers do. You don't actually think you're as good as Jared Goff, do you? Like, yeah, they make a lot of money, but you don't actually think you're as good as Trevor Lawrence, do you? Like, really? You would much rather have Trevor Lawrence than you. Are you kidding?
Yeah. It's like, Brock,
we could go to the Super Bowl 25 quarterbacks. Like, we don't actually think that much of you.
That you have around you, son. You understand the team that you're on. That comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
You want to be, and you know what's even crazier? They may get, I don't know, man, but they may get Brock on the leader tip. They may say, you're supposed to be a leader, man. We kind of want this thing to get done. In order for us to pay you, how do you think we're going to be able to keep Trent around? Trent's 30, Trent's 47, 3 more years, he'll have his 50th birthday. How long you think we want Trent to stay around? It's like, I can see them. I could see them like gaslighting him into thinking that he needs the Niners, not the other way around. But I'll put it like this. There's only one guy that was able to get exactly what he wanted to the T, and that is Nick Bosa. But if they pull this off with Brock, nobody's safe. If they could do this with their quarterback, nobody's safe as far as contracts are concerned.
My theory that Chris Sims is sort of like Kyle's unofficial mouthpiece. It's like they have each other's initials tattooed. Like they kind of think alike. And what did Chris Sims say about the Super Bowl loss? He said that if Brock was better, like sure he's good, but if he really was that top level quarterback, they would have won. They put it on Brock.
They did. And
I'm telling you, they're going to do that this year. It's like, yeah, you're good, but not more than $45 million a year good. And it's going to be interesting when Tua gets more than that.
That's the thing about having guys who were born on third base and hit a triple. You know what I mean? Like Chris Sims, he had like the best of the best football experience. It was average, bro. Like average at best. Kyle wasn't even average. And this is what you get when you get these guys where they were around a high level of football for a very long time, and they've become jaded into really looking at what real talent takes and what it really is. Like, it's kind of like the fact that they could say, but you weren't really that good, almost comes from the inadequacies of when they played, when they were told they weren't that good. It's like, dude, call a better game. Like, what are you talking about?
How long have you been waiting to pay that one forward?
Exactly.
Christian Chip says fans should petition Jed to get KS sent to the booth. Would that be funny? Like, look, head coach, we don't need your negative energy down here. Why don't you just go up to the booth, talk to us on the on the headphones? Dimitrov says Brock is doing untraditional things every game. He is a gamer. How many times does he have to go off script? He is more special than Kyle, in my honest opinion.
Hey, real trick, get rid of Mariah in your chat.
Huh?
Get rid of Mariah in your chat.
Okay, I'll get rid of Mariah for sure.
Yeah.
Mariah.
It's a family show, man. You fucking up the money.
Ban user and delete their comments. Okay, you're out. I don't even know what happened. But Dimitar, like he says, Brock is more special than Kyle. I would have to agree. Because you know what? Brock can go off script and ad lib, and Kyle can't.
Right.
It's a bit different.
It is. It is.
Chris says, nice, coach. I dig the recipe analogy. That was the highlight of the show for sure. I loved it. Kyle criticism is warranted, but then Kyle Levy slam hasn't been funny or fresh for a month. Okay, well.
We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, I like the recipe analogy. It really explains why a guy isn't really a genius, man. A genius is a guy who can walk into someone else's pantry and be like, all right, what you got? All right, cool, I got you. Right?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's like the short order cook. It's like it's the difference between you coming in there with your so that you got pecorino cheese, and your mom coming in and being like,
you have dried porcini mushrooms.
Yeah. By any chance, do you have any sun-dried tomatoes? And it's like no one has that. But we got eggs, and we got bread, and it's like your mom goes in. It's like, all right, well, we can at least have French toast and eggs. That's the very least we can have. Like, come on, guys. Like, so he needs to learn how to cook. I don't think he knows how to cook. I think he knows recipes.
I think I agree. I love that. That's the show. That's the coaches meeting. Kyle, if you watched, and I know you did, take a cooking class. Have a good one, everyone.